Sunday Surefire Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Martin, aka the Commish. Joining me today is the co-host, Ethan Weaver.
Kamish, how we doing?
We are doing pretty well, Ethan, doing pretty well. I'm actually very excited to announce that joining us today is a very special guest. We have the one and only Derek Brown joining us. Derek's a senior fantasy analyst at Fantasy Pros. D-Bro, what's going on, my man?
What's going on, boys? A good time to be alive. Right now, we've got a little small break in the NFL action. Like training camp OTA stuff is out there, but it's not like full-blown training camp season. So got a little bit of time before our lives go sideways. But again, we're getting some news and stuff. So it's good, man. It's good. It's a good time.
Yeah, it sure is, man, for sure. It's nice to take a quick little breather after a hectic rookie draft season that
Mm-hmm.
no doubt takes over a ton of your time and all of our time here
Yeah.
during the month of May. So yeah, good time to take a little bit of breather here. We're gonna run through a quick little Q&A with Derek. Maybe we'll learn some new things about him and maybe some of his friends over at Fantasy Pros that you might not otherwise know. So we'll run that, and then we're gonna talk about some Dynasty, which our listeners know is very, very near and dear to our hearts. We talk a ton of Dynasty on this program. I know I speak for Ethan and I when I say that it really is kind of our main love here in the fantasy world. So we'll talk a lot of that. We'll talk some undervalued players that you should be getting on your Dynasty teams this offseason if you're one of those managers looking to make a run at a championship, or maybe you're rebuilding, whatever the case may be. So, Derek, people know who you are at this point. You're on a lot of Fantasy Pros episodes, very much mainstream. But tell us about you. Like, how did Debro get into Derek to fantasy football initially, and what led you to Fantasy Pros?
I think you're being way too kind outside of the our nerd streets of X. Not a lot of people, I don't ever look at it that way, but so I do appreciate that, man. But yeah, dude, it's been a long ride. I say that. Been doing content probably since 2016. There's some Instagram post still out there in the ether about the first article I ever wrote, and I'll age myself here. I do remember Carson Palmer was in that article. I do remember Julius Thomas was in that article. So if you have any new listeners that don't know who the hell those players are, then that kind of puts it out there with age. But man, I got into this around that time and started writing and doing podcasts for a now defunct site called Fantasy Football 24/7. My buddy who actually still talk to on the regular, Willie Lovato, ran the site, sold draft kits and stuff. And he asked me one day, he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna do a podcast. Do you want to do that?" And I was like, "I don't know what that entails, but sure." And just dove straight like headlong into that. That led to different writing opportunities. I used to do, even before being hired by Fantasy Pros, I did free articles for them. I wrote for Numberfire, Player Profiler, Fantasy Data, Gridiron Experts, where me and Erickson actually cross paths and coming up in the ranks and stuff. And I mean, one thing after another, man, landed at FTN for a full-time job and then made the transition to Fantasy Pros. Man, it's been a whirlwind, 4 or 5 years doing this full-time as a job. Before that, if anybody out there even cares, I was a full-time pediatric nurse, worked for St. Jude for over 12 years, did nursing management and all that kind of crap. That's actually why I moved to Dallas, Fort Worth, and like originally, and then we just ended up staying here after I moved here for a job and stuff, man. But yeah, now I'm kind of rambling, but it's kind of the long and short of what got me to, what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's always fun to learn where people were in their lives before they really fully got into the fantasy football space. And like you said, from some of those name drops there, you've been involved with the game a long time, and so it's always fun to hear. Ethan, you've said it on the show before how you got started into fantasy. Why don't you just kind of refresh that and just tell us how you got into it real quick?
Yeah, real quick. It's funny you mentioned 2016 because that was right around the time me and Pat here started our first Dynasty League. And back then, there was really not much. There was not a ton of content out there. And now you fast forward to 2024, the amount of content out there is just insane. But I love the game of football. I've been playing football my whole life since I was 8, then through college. And I was actually in college, and one of my friends was like, "Hey, I even played any fantasy football until college." And he hit me up, "Hey, you want to join my redraft league?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." And back in whatever it was, 2000, 2011. There wasn't, like I said, a ton of content out there. I didn't even have a smartphone. I had no clue what I was doing. And I ended up getting the 101 that year. I'm a massive Patriot fan. And I took Tom Brady 101 in a non-super
Oh
flex.
Lord.
In a non-super flex league. Super flex probably didn't even exist back then. But that tells you where I started and now where I am today. But I'm much more informed today. But tons changed. Like I said, from 2010, 2011 to now, and it's been a great ride. And now I love talking fantasy every week. I'm in a ton of leagues, and it's definitely a passion of mine.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And I guess quickly for me too, fantasy football is it's kind of a legacy activity for me, honestly. My dad started a redraft league back in 1995 when I was 4 years old. So it's kind of been in my my house growing up, my whole life. I knew what it was. I could have told you at 10 years old what a flex spot was. This just really just kind of always growing up around it, which has been fun. And that league is actually still going, and I'm now in the league. So that's been fun to kind of play with some old fossils that remember the days where this is the true story where my dad, to calculate the scores, there were no online platforms to do so
Mhm.
back in the 90s. So he was pulling up a newspaper, getting the ink under the fingernails, all that good stuff, and with a pencil. I remember him sitting down at the coffee table, just writing things down, and he was calculating the scores so he could bring them into work the next day and tell his buddies who won their matchup. So that's old school stuff right there, Derek. You hear anyone talk about stuff like that from back
Oh
in
yeah,
the old
man.
heads?
Yeah, no, definitely. Lots of good stories. And I got mad respect for anybody that was doing that because here's the real of it. Anybody running those leagues, it's not just you were doing the math. It was if you got the math wrong for any reason and the amount of shit that you got about that, like then they're like questioning everything. Oh, I got to do all the math for everybody on my team. Like, what if you got this guy wrong too? Like,
Yeah.
it's so the commissions back then were like full blown savage because it's not only all the legwork you had to do for the entire league. Thanklessly, it was if there was any kind of like small faux pas, then you never heard the end of it ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And then back in those days, it was tough to go get a newspaper from 3 months ago to
Yep.
cross reference those stats. So it kind of stuck, and then that stain was stuck on you forever for sure. But yeah, like you said, we've all had a fun journey in fantasy. You ended up at Fantasy Pros. You talk with a bunch of cool guys and girls sometimes. Every week it feels like you're on there, which is great.
Mhm.
But I think that I know a bulk of our listeners listen to you guys somewhat regularly. So give me some of the good stuff here, D-Bro. Give me something funny about Erickson or Pizza P or Wormley, whoever it is. Tell us something funny about them the audience
Ooh.
doesn't necessarily know.
So this might not come as a huge shock to people because if they've listened to Joe, they know Joe well enough that he's a character, okay? And I will say this about every single person under the umbrella with Fantasy Pros that I work with on a daily basis. One, we are actually friends. And two, they're the same freaking people that when the mics come on and they turn off, they're the same people, so there is no difference. So people might already expect this from knowing Joe, but Joe actually is a classically trained actor, like went to school for this. And once upon a time, he used to be a stage combat professor, aka he taught people how to fight with swords. He would do choreography. He ran all of that. So when you go to Joe and it's like Joe can actually like sing and act and do all of those different things. So outside of, being a character on the shows, he actually is classically trained in all of that stuff. So it's like, do I ever want to pick up a play sword and fight Joe? No, I don't want to even do like lightsaber fight. No, 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 no. Like he actually knows how to do all that shit.
Yeah, you want to stay far away from him there. And if I were you, I'd be worried about him lining up across from me when you guys get that flag football tournament going. If he's
Oh
got
God, yeah. Well, he always plays quarterback and stuff like that. He likes to give me a hard time because I've got like 60-year-old man like ankles and shit, but I could still throw the freaking ball like a mile. So Joe likes to pretend like he's the best quarterback on the Fantasy Pros team. That's not actually the truth.
Yeah, fair enough. That's good. That's good. That's good insight there. Thanks for sharing that. It's always good to learn a little bit more about the guys behind the mics for sure. But the bulk of our show tonight is going to be Dynasty, like I mentioned, and there's it really is a growing part of the fantasy world, and more people who have played redraft forever are getting into Dynasty. So I guess for our newer players out there, Debro, I guess what's the first piece of advice you would give to a first time Dynasty manager?
Um, I think the two hardest parts for somebody getting into Dynasty are trading and how to navigate a startup. And I think that, and this kind of goes along with redraft and Dynasty, like anybody just new to fantasy, the biggest thing for me is I just go BPA, man. Like you don't have to try to fill out. I think a lot of people when they get into startups and Dynasty and they go through these drafts and they're saying, oh, I've got so many wide receivers and running backs and blah blah blah, and oh, I don't have a tight end yet and things like that. None of that matters. Don't worry about that. Draft the best players available on the board. And because here's the thing, guys, like you're not setting a lineup. If you're doing a startup today, you're not setting a lineup for weeks and months. And even when you get to that point, the league doesn't stop. Like this isn't best ball and draft it, forget it, pew, it's gone. It's in the rear view. The league doesn't stop when the draft ends. So, like, if you're going BPA with every one of your picks, you're naturally going to build up probably pockets of depth on your teams. So, if you walk out of the draft and it's like, well, I'm kind of light at running back. Well, now you've got depth to trade from. And you didn't reach on saying, oh, I need to get a running back this spot, or I need to get another wide receiver. Just draft the best damn player on the board at that time, and you figure all the rest of it out in trades and waivers and stuff after the fact. And I mean, that's just kind of an overarching thing. I'd say more specifically, like you talked about certain formats and Superflex. Superflex, I always preach to people. I'm like, look, you draft your quarterbacks, and whether that's in the startup draft or rookie drafts, you don't trade for them because people, and this is more just a pet peeve of mine, guys. People, when they talk about Superflex and quarterbacks and stuff, they always make it sound like it's just so damn easy to trade quarterbacks in Superflex. It's not. That shit is way harder than people want to talk about. It's like you could get a haul, you could get a ransom. Like, come on, let's be real about it. The reality is when you're trading quarterbacks in Superflex, you're probably going to be sending a quarterback. That other person, you're probably asking for a quarterback back in return. So the assumption is I have a quarterback that you like, you have a quarterback that I'm willing to trade for, and the other values align. And it's like, it's not nearly as easy to trade quarterbacks, and you're probably going to pay a ransom if you do try to trade for a quarterback. In Superflexes, people kind of like frame that. So for me, it's you're drafting those quarterbacks. I'm not trading for them.
Yeah, fair enough. And people say that quarterbacks are never cheaper than they are in startups, at least the established guys, and certainly
True.
with the rookies there. Ethan, what are your thoughts on that in terms of the BPA and also the Superflex angle?
I think BPA, especially for a young dynasty manager, is a good strategy. Just because you don't want to get into the mindset where, like Debro said, that you're trying to fill out your roster and you just keep passing up on value. I mean, the more value you pass up, and then it's like, okay, great, you can set it when it's all said and done, you can set a lineup. But the amount of value that you passed up that could have helped you in future trades to actually make your team a contender. I mean, those are big misses. So I do think that's a pretty good strategy just because if you're young in dynasty, it's tough to know maybe player tiers or player values. So it's tough to make a trade. Anybody, I mean, we were all there in your first dynasty league, and especially when I was first starting up in dynasty, I wasn't keen on all these player values. So it's like it's tough to know what you're actually going to offer for a certain player. So definitely, but I definitely think drafting for value is definitely key there. And I'm definitely a proponent in Superflex. I am always trying to build around my quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I am okay trading for a quarterback if I can get the right deal done. Obviously, those top end guys, a lot of times it does cost a king's ransom, but depending how you built your team, if you do have you accumulated a lot of future picks or a lot of depth, and you can kind of package that and pay up, that's one thing. But there's no cheaper time to get a locked in QB. If they hit, then your rookie draft. And if you do hit on a couple of these quarterbacks in your rookie draft, or you locked in your starters in the startup, and then you can use that rookie draft and for years to come just to bolster your running back, your receivers, your tight ends. So once you lock in those quarterbacks, then it just opens the door a ton during those rookie drafts to kind of bolster your lineup.
Well, so also to piggyback on that, if you build, specifically in Superflex stuff, if you build the backbone of your team to be quarterbacks and wide receivers, that kind of build, that fits everything. That fits whether you're going to rebuild or even if you're going to compete. Like, you could tear it down and still, if your quarterback room is freaking awesome and you've got some cornerstone wide receivers, that fits any build. That fits even if your team gets all injured and goes sideways and you're like, I'm going to strip it down to the studs. You still got both of those rooms, especially quarterbacks, taken care of. That type of backbone of your team fits compete, it fits rebuild, it fits everything.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I actually want to combine two of the things that you guys both touched on. Ethan brought up kind of a buzzword in fantasy, at least in recent years. That's using tiers to sort out your rankings and things like that. So, Devro, I guess when you're creating a Superflex tier in a dynasty format, I mean, sounds like you're prioritizing players like quarterbacks and young wide receivers when you set those tiers. Is that accurate?
Oh, it's very accurate. I mean, right now, I'm pulling up my ranks right now. I mean, the top 8 picks, I literally, in my Superflex dynasty rankings right now, I don't have a running back until the 21st player overall. So the top 20 players in my rankings are all wide receivers and quarterbacks. And even if you want to go all the way down to the top 31 players, there's only 3 running backs in that top tier. And 31 players, 3 running backs. That's it. So yes, I want to build with quarterbacks and wide receivers, and that's how I want to build the true backbone of my team in those first like 4 rounds.
Fair enough. So, and I think in the earlier rounds, it's pretty obvious. You want quarterbacks, you want productive young receivers, ideally young productive wide receivers. They're going to stand the test of time on your roster. But I guess from an overall sense, when you're in a startup draft, like, what's your ideal approach in that? I mean, you want your QBs, but are you kind of a slow builder kind of guy? Or are you a win right away kind of manager, or a productive struggle? Where are you at on that?
I usually build young teams, and I mean, almost every startup draft that I'm in, I usually start quarterback. And then it's like, I'll figure out the third or fourth quarter, like I'll figure out third quarter QB3 sometime later. You know, I'll pick like, whether it's a young guy that falls or an older aging quarterback that I can just cycle as my QB3 for the next 2 years, and that's fine. But usually 9 times out of 10, it's QB, and then figuring out what the board looks like. I've gone, and 9 times out of 10, it's usually quarterback, wide receiver, is usually the first 3 rounds. And then I kind of sit here and figure out, what does the board look like? Am I going to move up? Am I going to trade down? And like you're talking about tiers, guys, like I move all over the board in startups. Like, I want to move up for players that I have conviction for, or maybe they're the last guy in a tier. And versus if I see a long flat tier, and the great thing about it is if you're using certain apps like Sleeper and you're doing dynasty startups on there, you can kind of see where there's pockets of players that I want to target or whatever. So it's like, well, if I'm in the 4th round and I've got all these players in a long flat tier, and it's like, well, I've got wide receivers that I like in the 5th and 6th round. Well, I can tier back. I could trade back around, pick up another, maybe a future first or something like that, and still get maybe 1 player or 2 players in that pocket that I like that are in the same tier as the guys in the 4th round. So I feel like moving around a startup and going up and down the board, figuring out tiers and pockets of players that I like, or can I move back and build some future equity at the same time? That's how I usually am working startups. So, newer players in Dynasty aren't going to trade as much as I trade a lot in startups, but that's usually how I work it, where I'm hopping around the board trying to either pick up future equity in the process, or I really like to kind of move around the board, and maybe I'll pick up like 2 7th round picks or 2 8th round picks because I love the players that are in that range.
Yeah, fair enough. And Ethan, I guess touch on that process on your side of things in a startup. Is that something you're trying to do too? Move back and acquire either future draft picks or just multiple later picks in the startup draft? Is that a targeted strategy of yours as well?
It is. I have a very similar strategy. I like to build my team through the quarterback position and then the receiver. So a lot of times I will go quarterback as well. And then, but I guess depending where you are in the draft, like if you have a top 5 pick or whatever, and you draft quarterback there, by the time you get around to the back end of the second, I'm not going to reach on anybody. If I don't love a quarterback there, I'll go best player available, most likely the best receiver available there. But I do love to move around the board. I tend to move back and accumulate other startup picks or future rookie picks. Pat, you can attest to this. There is no cheaper time to buy future rookie picks than a startup draft. And I know
Why do you say that?
Very true.
because I know what your
Very
strategy is.
true.
You're usually a guy that accumulates a million rookie picks and tanks in year 1, and then you build for 2 years, then you have a juggernaut in year 3.
Yeah, that's been a long-standing procedure of mine that you've seen multiple times now, Ethan, where and in some years it's easier to do it than others. I think entering 2023 was a great time to do something like that, where I was moving back like crazy in the startup draft. I was letting people come up and get their pick of those QBs. I did end up getting a couple of guys that I liked at the quarterback position, but it was a good time to do it because the 2024 QB class, it was a strong one. And you call it tanking, I call it rebuilding. It's, the same idea. Tanking is almost a dirty word in some ways, but
I was fixing to say, he just sound like he just said something X-rated on here. Like, it's not tanking. You refile him that somewhere else.
Hey, my apologies, Pat.
So it's all about how you word it, my man. But yeah, no, I am the guy who's willing to be patient for a year, maybe even 2. But a big part of that calculus too is that the home leagues that I play in are predominantly what the dynasty leagues I'm in. So these are leagues that I know are going to stand the test of time and be around for 10 plus years. Versus if you're looking at just an internet league out there with strangers, you never know what the hell can happen with one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that thing could go belly up after 2 years. So maybe my approach in those formats would be different, but just comes back to knowing your league. And if you know that your league is good to go for the long run, then don't be afraid to hit that rebuild button. Maybe not your first time around in Dynasty, but once you get some experience, it's a fun way to it's a rewarding experience when you go from nothing to a champion in a handful of years. But let's talk about the tearing down piece of it, deep bro. So I guess will be our last question here for now is like how do you know it's time to rebuild in Dynasty? Because if you play long enough, there's gonna be a time where you got to rip it down and start over. When do you know that point's arrived for your Dynasty teams?
When you find yourself kind of floating in the middle, when you look at your roster and you say, I'm probably sitting in somewhere of that like 5th through 7th or 8th spot, when you look at how your roster stacks up against other teams, and I either want to be first or I want to be last. And if I'm sitting somewhere in the middle, it's like, okay, well, there's a problem there. Whether I've got guys that are coming up on like contract years, or maybe we swung and missed, like, things didn't work out. Like I took some shots on like Damian Pierce and I got burned by that, or Ramondre Stevenson, I got burned by that. And it's like, okay, I need to kind of retool some things, and a lot of times I'm trying to kind of balance. I mean, I build usually like young teams, but there's also a lot of times where I'm trying to balance some of that in the same ilk. It's like, I don't want to get too out over my skis, and whether it's like too young, or if I am building a super young team, I don't want to get where I'm too old, but I don't have any future equity. So it's like, if I am competing and I am rebuilt, like, I like to kind of keep at least my foot in the toe of like some rookie picks. Or if you're not doing that, that there's possibilities you can trade into rookie drafts too. So really for me, if it's time to rebuild, I'm looking at a roster that probably has a lot of uncertainty, whether it's a lot of guys that the value is following, maybe they're getting older, maybe they've got contract issues and stuff like that. And then it's just like, look, if I'm floating in the middle of the standings and I can look at my roster and you're being real about it, and I'm somewhere in that 5th to 7th or 8th team kind of spot, it's like, all right, let's just rip it down. Let's rip it down to the studs, and we're going to rebuild it back up.
Yeah, that self-evaluation can be one of the hardest things to do for a dynasty manager, where you're in the middle and you're like, oh, if if these 5 things go right, then maybe I'll contend this year. And usually you're better off just hitting the eject button on that. Would you agree, Ethan?
To your point, I think the hardest part about that is once the people make the idea of, okay, I'm going to rebuild, then you want to do it right then. You know what I mean? You're like, all right, I got to trade. I got to rip it all out. But it's like the hard part of that, I think one of the hardest parts about rebuilding a roster is knowing if I get rid of, okay, let's use Ramondre Stevenson right now. If I got to trade him right now, I'm going to get pennies on the dollar. Like I'm not going to get anything for him right now, as opposed to you have to have that patience. And it's like, I want to rebuild this team while knowing that you're not going to get the max return on value for him right now. It's like, I need to wait until the season is going along and he's had 2 or 3 strong games. And then I try to kick him to a contender. And I say, here, you want him? I need to try to maximize the returns, and not just like a king's ransom, but like you're trying to just the small little equity churns and knowing, okay, maybe I could have sold him for a 25-second now, but maybe if I wait, can I get a 25-second and a third? And those small little wins, you just kind of stack up.
Absolutely. Ethan, you on the same page with that?
Yeah, same page exactly. You said a couple of keywords there. The first one was like being real with yourself. Hope can be the killer of so many dynasty teams because you just like Pat said, you just
it's a hell of a drug. Yeah, hope is a hell of a drug.
Put that on my
really
headstone.
Yeah, it just you think you're oh, if this guy hits or this guy has a bounce back, it's like at the end of the day, you need to be honest with yourself. You need to look at your roster and be like, can I compete with the upper echelon teams? And a lot of times it's no. And then that's the time where you're like, you know what, I got to tear it down. And yeah, it's also patience. Like lack of patience is another killer of dynasty teams. To Debro's point, with knowing when to sell productive players that or could be productive players like Ramondre Stevenson. Like you said, why sell now? Be patient, even if you have to wait to the trade deadline when everybody's willing to pay a little more to push themselves to a championship. That's when you got to sell. So, I mean, lack of patience and hope will just kill you.
Yeah, getting rid of that future first for somebody that's going for the title doesn't feel like that big a price point. But if they're sitting there right now with the first and they're like, I don't really, I don't know. I mean, like, am I really contending as opposed to they're like, no, I'm a top 2 team. Yeah.
Yeah, here you
I'll
go.
get rid of that first.
Yeah.
It'll be a late first. I don't even care about it now.
Yeah, make sure they're 8 beers deep at the bar when you have that conversation with them.
2 a.m. trade offers are a real thing.
They're dangerous. They're dangerous.
Very much so. Very much so. This is a safe space. I mean, one of the things I wanted to bring up earlier was that when you get into Dynasty new, assuming that you are going to make some terrible, god-awful, shit-can trades
yep.
that you will hate for the rest of your life. And do you mind if I bring one up real fast?
Please do, because I got a worse one. Please do. Mine's worse.
This is I don't know if yours is worse than this shit. I got one that like oh god, if this gets clipped and put on social media, I'll never hear the end of it. But dude,
you're our guest, fire away.
One of the first years I got into doing Dynasty heavy, I remember I traded away Todd Gurley right before he went on that historic like CMC type of run for 2 or 3 years. I traded Todd Gurley and a future second away for Amir Abdullah and Sammy Watkins.
Oh, yikes.
I still remember
to this day.
It was
we've all been
not
there.
good, boys. It's not good.
Yeah.
Not good.
That's tough. Ethan, you know my trade that I'm referring to here, and it's worse, isn't it?
I mean, there's a couple going through my head, so you tell me. But
don't give me that as a couple.
We're pulling all the skeletons out. Yeah. Come on, man.
So here it is. Here's the long and short of it. Probably a year or so into my Dynasty career here, 28. I believe the year was 2018. It was whatever year Le'Veon Bell decided not to play.
That was a bad one.
I'm sitting there in the spring, maybe late winter, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I came up just short last year. I'm a stud running back away. Le'Veon Bell's great. He's still got a few years left. He's going to be awesome. So I go in there and I trade Julio Jones and Keenan Allen. So it's Julio at the tail end of his prime, we'll say. And then Keenan Allen has another 5-6 years left in him. And two 2020 first-round picks out the door for Le'Veon Bell, James Conner, and Devontae Parker, I believe, was the last piece in the trade. Now
Oh my
this gets
Lord.
even worse. I am not done yet. The 2020 first round draft picks turned into two players by the names of Jonathan Taylor and Justin Jefferson.
That's
Okay,
gold
well,
right there.
you win.
Not, my
You
guy.
win. That was way worse. You win. You win. I will say you did save a little bit of face, and you can always kind of point back to him and be like, well, I was smart enough to get James Conner back in the deal. So
That's right. And I
You
was
know,
also
so,
smart enough to
yeah.
flip Lev Bell at the door the next year for Nick Chubb. So
Oh,
it-
shit. Okay, well, there you go. You see, this is what you're saving face. This is working out well.
it's really a case of you live and you learn, and you get better. You get better with time and experience. And 7 years later, I would never do anything like that ever again. Ethan, do you have a quick worst trade you ever made story before we move on?
I'm sure. I mean, I definitely have some doozies. Just like ones that are coming to my head right now. I remember trading the 102, which ended up being Josh Jacobs. Obviously, he's had a pretty good career, and I ended up getting back. This is where I needed a tight end. This is when I was all about like, hey, this guy's profile, athletic specimen. I traded away 102, which was Josh Jacobs, for OJ Howard and JJ Arcega-Whiteside. So got basically nothing for my Josh Jacobs there.
I'll give one more learning point, and this one was more recent. So again, this is another point of clarity. Any of us that do and some people could call this psychotic, any of us that do rookie drafts before the NFL draft, I can say tread lightly. Okay, when you get a little bit out over your skis, sometimes you can be made to pay for it. I will own this in saying this, and this again, I'm gonna date myself with this. I had the 101 pick in a super flex draft, in a rookie draft. I took Malik Willis at the 101.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was gonna. Yeah, I knew
I
you
knew it
were
was
gonna say
coming.
that too.
And I took Malik Willis over Brees Hall in that year at the 101 because I was like, if he gets the first round capital and he's a running quarterback,
It's a lock.
I mean, he's gonna do well. And then the NFL draft said no, 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 and that's all she wrote. So
And then we
a little
saw
bit more
Malik.
recent.
Then we saw Malik Willis play, and he said, "Nah, nah, nah."
Exactly, he Dikembe'd me as well when he got on the field finally.
Yeah, that's brutal. But yeah, at the same time, as tough as those are, we're having fun. It's fun to look back at those bad deals you made, especially when you come out for the better of it in the long run. If to avoid those type of situations, there's an outlet you can go to make sure you're making the best decisions that you can for your dynasty teams. And that brings us to today's sponsor, which is the Did It app. That's DIDIT. Using Did It, you can instantly get connected to a fantasy expert that can answer any question that you might have, whether it be a startup draft question, a start sit decision, or just a general overview of a strategy discussion that you want to have. You can get all your questions answered in real time. And the team here at Sunday Surefire, we're on the Did It app as well. And not to toot our own horn too much, but we are one of the top ranked groups of analysts in both the Dynasty and the redraft platforms at the moment. So definitely make sure you're giving them a chance if you're in need of advice. It's for iOS users only for now, but give the app a try. Check it out on X. It's at GetDidit. That's GETDIDIT to see what it's all about. And with that, we're going to round into some dynasty players that you should be targeting that are a little bit under the radar here. Debo, you're our guest here, so just fire away, man. Tell us who dynasty managers should be looking to get in on the cheap right now.
Well, unfortunately, Coach Speak is making if anybody's not following Coach Speak out on X.com, you need to be. Coach Speak Index is making this a thing, so maybe it's not as sneaky as it was a few days or weeks ago. But man, I've been trying to get Jackson Smith and Jigba everywhere I can. I've drafted him in startups recently. I've tried to trade for him, especially early in the offseason. Everybody's so down on him. You do have pockets of truthers like myself that are like, when people come knocking at the door, they're like, nah, 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 nah. I'm not giving him up to you. But he is much more attainable than, again, if we want to rewind to last year around this time, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think there's so much context that needs to be given as far as how his rookie season played out. And I mean, legitimately, the guy had the worst run out he could have possibly had. Walked into the season with a broken wrist, didn't even play over 60% of the snaps until freaking week 6. So that kind of gets buried when people talk about just how his rookie season played out. And then you also add on top of that Shane Waldron took a guy that everybody religiously said he is one of the best route runners that we've seen in the last few years. That's one of the crooks of his game. We had some worries maybe about his athletic testing and stuff like that. He took a guy that we were like, oh no, like he can run routes. He could separate. He's really good. And Shane Waldron said, I want to turn you into a screen merchant, sir. You're going to catch nothing but screens when you're out there on the field. Congratulations on your minus 2.9 ADOT on all these screens. He had the 7th highest screen rate of of all wide receivers last year, 7th most screen targets, and also keeping that in mind on a limited snap rate to begin the season. Shit, if he'd have played the whole freaking year, he might have led the damn league in screen targets. Why was that the case? And if you look at Jackson Smith-Njigba's deeper numbers, it all says that this dude really is exactly who we thought he was. You know, to quote Dennis Green going back a few years. But if you look at Jackson Smith-Njigba among 61 qualifying wide receivers that had at least 40 perimeter targets last year, this guy ranked 14th in first downs per route run. If you want to talk about also what his metrics were on the outside playing the perimeter, 15th in yards per route run, 4th in target per route run rate. So when Shane Waldron wasn't like, hey, catch all these freaking screens, and Jackson Smith-Njigba was running a legit route tree on the perimeter, he was good. So I'm just buying into a second-year wide receiver, has the capital, has the talent, and the idiot OC that did all this stuff is now out. And now maybe, because everybody wants to talk about Seattle and being a run-first offense, did anybody see what Ryan Grubb did at Washington last year? Y'all think that's really going to happen? I'm sorry. I'm betting against that. And so now if we get a pass-happy offense in Seattle, which they've got the parts and pieces to do it. They've got good wide receivers. They got Noah Fant. They could throw the damn ball. Geno Smith actually was good last year when he was not under pressure. Yeah, I'm buying into Jackson Smith-Njigba, man. Trading for him, drafting him in startups. I'm in.
What would you say to anyone who comes back with, and you'll probably get this more from a redraft focused manager, but the fact that he's competing with the likes of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, 2 established players on that depth chart, where do you think that, what does that leave for him for 2024?
Every really good passing offense in the NFL, most of them have 2 established receiving weapons. You don't have these offenses where it's like, he's the only guy. That's it. He's going to get 100, 200 targets, like 150 targets. So like every really good offense in the NFL, there are multiple receivers. Like, is that like, just to elaborate on that, is anybody saying, well, I don't want to draft Devontae Smith because he's got AJ Brown to deal with? I don't want to draft another talented wide receiver because he's got another guy who's going to be competing with targets. No, a lot of these guys are competing for volume on a weekly basis. And for Tyler Lockett, he's old as freaking dirt. His yards per route run has dropped in each of the last 3 seasons. So, I mean, here's the thing. If you believe in talent, then you should believe in JSN because targets are a reflection of talent. Targets are earned. That's why you should never worry about, all this vacated targets and vacated air yards. That shit doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. It's one of the worst processes to follow as far as looking at players and saying, well, all this vacated blah, blah, blah is out there. Dude, if a guy's not good, he's not going to earn targets straight up. And he's not going to earn targets at a high clip. So if you believe the guy is talented, he's going to earn volume.
Ethan, are you buying into the talent for JSN over the established aging guys like Tyler Lockett or maybe even a younger guy in DK Metcalf?
I am. I like JSN coming out. I was always high on him. I think he is a great candidate to buy low if you can. Unfortunately, all the dynasty leagues I play in, they're all truthers. Apparently, he doesn't come cheap. But I mean, to D-Rose point, this offense, we don't know what it's going to be, but I don't believe it's going to be a run first offense. Obviously with the new OC from Washington there, and I just think if this offense can take a step forward, I know Debro has been mentioned on a couple of his shows with Geno Smith. I know you think Geno Smith's going to have a good year this year if they can keep him upright. His pressure rate last year was through the roof. So if he can stay upright and Ryan Grubb can instill that Washington kind of passing attack, why can't JSN move up the rankings a ton? I mean, I like the player, and if you can get him low, now's the time to get him.
To give more context to the point you just brought up, Geno Smith faced the 5th highest pressure rate and the 5th highest pressure rate over expectation last year. And when he actually had clean pockets, this is where Geno ranked amongst 33 qualifying quarterbacks. Clean pocket, 5th in yards per attempt, had the highest big time throw rate out of all 33 quarterbacks, and was 5th best in PFF passing grade. He still played really damn good. He just never got clean pockets, ever.
Yeah, if you're in that truther club for JSN, you're definitely clinging to some of those things. And he's a young guy. He's going to get better on his own right too. So just a combination of Seattle putting a better offense on the field and keeping Geno upright should lead to better things in the future for JSN starting this year. We're going to stick to the wide receiver position with another young player. D-Bro, if anyone listens to you, that you love Christian Watson, but Ethan also loves him some Christian Watson. So
let's go, baby. Come on. I need to hear the sermon.
The three of us are going to be in lockstep here, Ethan, but you can take it.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like about Christian Watson? The guy clearly has the talent with that size and speed. We're all looking for players and good offenses. I think the Packers can take another step with Jordan Love. I'm very high on Jordan Love. Year 2 in that offense, I think he can take off. And Christian Watson, obviously, to start his career, has been a little injury prone, but like we all say, I mean, everyone's injury prone until you're no longer injury prone, right? And I know he went to a specialist this offseason to get looked at his hamstring, because he just, hey, why can't my hamstrings stay intact and why can't I stay in the field? So, but when he's on the field, with him, Jane Reed, and Romeo Dobbs, in games when they're all playing together, he's led those 3 in target share and air yard share, which tells me Jordan Love's looking to him, and it spells opportunity to be the alpha in that offense. So I'm all in, especially at his current ranking right now on Fantasy Pros ECR. He's overall 92, wide receiver 43. Yeah, and to get a guy like Christian Watson with wide receiver a 43 price tag, he's a guy that can finish every single week as either a wide receiver 1 or a high-end wide receiver 2 any given week. He just has that kind of upside. I mean, he's played in 23 games in his career and scored 14 touchdowns. This guy's a big play ready to happen. I think he has every opportunity to be the alpha on that offense. I know there's a lot of young, talented players, but if I'm going to bet on one at his price, I'm going Christian Watson.
I love this call. And just to put, where rubber meets the road, money in my mouth is, like, whatever cliche I want to use of this. I have Watson as my wide receiver 30 in my ranks on fantasypros.com. And just to also add to your point, Ethan, it's not just that he led the entire team in target share and air yard share. When all 3 of those guys were full-time players, he also led them in yards per route run, end zone targets, first read share, and first downs per route run. So, like, every damn thing that we care about for wide receivers, legit, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. When they were all full-time players, he led the team in every damn thing we should care about. How is he not the wide receiver 1? And I'm sorry, Jaden Reed Hive, you're wrong.
Agree.
I knew coming in here that we were all on the same page with this, so I didn't make many notes on Christian Watson for the show. The only one I did write down is highest receiver he's the receiver with the highest upside outside the top 36.
Yep.
And that price point is an absolute steal. So I think we're in lockstep with that one. I'm looking forward to 2024 for Christian Watson for sure. I'm going to kick it over to the running back position here. I'm going to go talk to Zamir White, who's 108th overall on the Fantasy Pros Superflex Dynasty list.
Dude, y'all are just hitting dingers left and right on this damn show, man. I agree with all of this shit. I love it. Go ahead. I'm going to hang up and just listen. Go ahead.
There you go. Go ahead. We'll take the gloves off with some players down the line here. We'll get the softballs out of the way.
I'm ready for fighting, but I'm loving this right now. This is glorious.
We'll keep the kumbaya going for the moment. But yeah, Zamir White, 108 overall, RB28 on that list. And this is one of those guys we've sort of just been waiting for the Raiders to replace atop this depth chart throughout the offseason, but it just didn't happen. And the market, I feel like in the dynasty landscape, has been very slow to correct on this. which is creating a buying opportunity for dynasty managers. The team's only free agent signing was Alexander Madison. And I don't know about you guys, but if you caught that live grenade that was Alexander Madison's fantasy season last year as a quote unquote lead back, like, that guy ain't it. Like, he showed it to us. So they waited till the 6th round to draft Dylan Lobby out of the University of New Hampshire. And Debro, we touched on this before we came on, but I'm actually from New Hampshire. My wife went to UNH, and let me tell you, man, I've seen games there. That program ain't cranking out quality NFL players on the regular.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me you have Lobby like a face tattoo on your back. Sorry, I thought this was going to go a different direction, but go ahead.
No, like, he's a dude I would bump into at the bar up there, and I have no idea who he is. Shout out to Scorps. That's a fun bar up there at UNH. Right? Any UNH listeners out there, but
he's a good kid, man. But people are massively overweighting him. I agree there. He's probably not even starting freaking passing down back.
No,
that's gonna be Amir Abdullah. So like, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, he's a deep dynasty stash at best. But in terms of what White showed us in 23, I could regurgitate those stats all day, but how good he was in the final 4 weeks that he had that lead role. But I'd rather just kind of look at the backs that are ranked right in front of him. We got Aaron Jones, turns 30 towards the end of this year. He's closing in on 1,500 career touches. Tajay Spears is the next guy. He's a nice little player, but best case, he's in something resembling a 50-50 split with a Tony Pollard. Alvin Kamara, really nice win now piece, but he's 29 years old and closing in on 18.
Kamara's above him?
Yeah, slightly, a couple
good
spots.
Lord.
He's a guy who's closing in on 1,800 career touches too on his body. So, and then this one's going to kill you too, D-Bro. Najee Harris is ahead of him too. And I don't need to see any more of an undrafted free agent looking better than their first round pick in Pittsburgh.
Where do you guys have Zamir White ranked in dynasty running backs? I don't want to put you on the spot. I mean, I can tell you definitively if y'all have to look. He's my RB19 right now, so I'm with you.
Yeah, he's going to slide definitely into my top 24 backs, probably closer to like 20, 21, something like that.
Yeah.
And like just the play in Dynasty here recently has been to kind of fade the running back position in general. So, like, which is fair in some cases, but we're talking about a guy here who's outside the top 100 picks. I mean, how many other running backs outside the top 100 guys are locked into this much volume without some sort of like, oh, if this guy gets right in front of him, or if he exceeds expectations, blah, 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 some type of caveat attached to him. Like, he's the only guy outside the top 100 that's walking into this much assured volume, and I want a piece of it at that price point.
If he stays healthy, he's legitimately getting 300 touches. Like, that's going to happen. And I'm totally with you, like, in the sense of, like, I don't understand why nobody likes him. Like, I'll say this straight up. So I have takes out there on X. The receipts are out there. People can go look at it. They can look at my previous work. I was not in on Zamir White as a prospect. I was not. But when we get new information, as in the team has made him the starter, they had multiple chances in free agency and the NFL draft to do something about it if they didn't want him to be the starter, as well as when he was the starter amongst 41 qualifying running backs, he was 13th in explosive run rate and 6th in yards after contact per attempt. So it's like, not only did the team say, yes, we believe in him, he also produced in efficiency metrics that I care about when he got the run. Like, why do we not want that? I don't get it. This is not Alexander Madison. This is not your classic dead zone back that sucks. Like, I'm not telling you he is going to be like a top 10 running back this year, but he's going to get a shit ton of volume, and there's nobody on that depth chart to take it away from him. Madison, no. Abdullah, no. Lobby, no. Sincere McCormick, who's still on the depth chart. Yes, you're today's old, not hearing that name again. He's not taking it either. So why do we not want the damn guy? I don't get it.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me either. Ethan, any quick thoughts on Zamir White before we move on?
Just, hey, the team told you everything that you need to know regarding Zamir White. He's their guy. Opportunity is king in fantasy, and he has all of that. So definitely wheels up on Zamir White. And then that's why, I mean, in my startup last year, I like taking these dart throws on these late round running backs at the end of my bench. I drafted Zamir White way late in my dynasty startup, and I was able to use his value bump to actually use him in a package to get Puka Nacua. So so it was, yes, I was happy. So that's why it's like the running back position is all about opportunity, and it's happens over and over, and Zamir White fits the bill on that.
Well, speaking of Puka Nacua, he was obviously a late round rookie pick. If he was even drafted at all in your dynasty leagues last year, Steve, bro, let's pivot over to another late round wide receiver target in this year's draft in the form of Jermaine Burton to the Cincinnati Bengals. Why is he on your list as an undervalued candidate?
Again, why the hell don't people like Jermaine Burton? I don't understand it. It's like for years and years and years, people talked about, oh well, Tyler Boyd, and why should we care about Tyler Boyd as the third wide receiver for Cincinnati and the contingent upside if somebody gets hurt, even though he never realized any of that contingent upside, and we did have injuries to see it, and he never did it. Why do people not want all the Jermaine Burton they could possibly draft? He fell to the third round of the NFL draft, and that happened only because of the off-field concerns. That's it. That is legitimately it. Because if you turn on the film, if you look at all of his metrics, there is nothing else in a reason where he should have been a third-round pick. All the off-field stuff and however people want to parse through that. You want to talk about the talent of Jermaine Burton? Talent-wise, I can make you a really good case that he should have been like he would have not left the second round of the NFL draft, and hell, he might have been drafted in the freaking first round if we want to just talk about his talent. Because last year at Alabama, Jermaine Burton was 90th percentile against single coverage, 82nd percentile as far as yards per route run. And I can tell you the yards per route run and some of those other receiving metrics that people are just going to box score chase. I will be out there in the streets probably next year telling people that no, Milroe is not great, and shit, no, he's not the next Jalen Hurts. So you better get your mind right about that before you even put that moniker on him. Jermaine Burton would have had a much better statistical season if he had a really good thrower of the football under center at Alabama last year, and not, poor Milroe was
Yes.
catching strays
Yes.
here. But it's a reality. If you go watch Burton's tape, it's littered throughout his tape, man. The kid can freaking play. I don't care about the draft capital in the sense of, oh, well, he went in the third round. I understand the hit rates. I get all of that shit. We need to understand context with players, why they get drafted where. Look at the film, look at the deeper analytics and the metrics. And everybody is drafting Jermaine Burton in startups or even redraft, all the formats. Like, T. Higgins is going to be there past this season. Like, shit, T. Higgins is going to definitely be there in week 1. We don't know that. We don't know that. He is still yet to sign his tender. So right now, T. Higgins is just, he has no contract. Like, so why, how does anybody can definitively say, and dynasty managers love to say, like, they know everything. You cannot definitively tell me 115% right now, today, as we were recording this, nobody can tell me that T. Higgins will not hold out for a contract. Because everybody said, well, Jonathan Taylor won't do that. He'll never hold out. Until it happens. Jermaine Burton at his floor is going to be starting in 3 wide receiver sets. He's going to be the third option in this passing attack. His ceiling is immediately to be the number 2 in this passing attack. And why people don't want that, why he's languishing in ranks, why people like early rookie drafts, this man was falling into the third round of early rookie drafts, and I was gobbling up all Jermaine Burton, and I'm still going to do it because people are still disrespecting him.
Yeah,
so
you and me both,
home,
man. You and me
I'm
both.
just,
Let me
I've
hop
been
in here for a
drafting
second
him,
on this.
still doing it.
Yeah, you talked about Milroe. I want to go back to this time at Alabama here for a minute. Like, Milroe obviously brings a rushing element, and he's obviously not going to be an elite passer at the next level either. Like, I just felt like that Burton was at Bama at the wrong time. Like, if he had one of those statue quarterbacks that would just sit back there, sling the rock, Mac Jones, Greg McElroy, AJ McCarron, like someone just a pure distributor, I really feel like Burton would have been filling up a lot of those box score chasing numbers that are kind of just the easy low hanging fruit to look at. So I just felt like
and then otherwise he was miscategorized too, because I want to throw that up in his skill set. He was grossly miscategorized and typecast at Alabama as a field stretcher only with his high freaking ADOT. That kid can win at all 3 levels. And if you got a problem with that tape, go check his film and you hit me up on X. We could talk about his film for freaking days. He's not just a field stretcher.
He could definitely do more than that for sure. This is one of my favorite late round targets, and I hope he stays down there too. So you and I, maybe Ethan too, can keep gobbling up shares. So that's definitely a guy to monitor for sure. But Ethan, we're gonna go back to the running back position here. Talk to me about the Saints backup running back that you want to roster.
Yes, Kendre Miller, overall 128 on the Fantasy Pros ECR Dynasty and RB 39. And I just think this is a guy with his current situation at RB4 prices, I think has every opportunity to be an RB2, back end RB2 this year. The Saints invested a third round pick in 2023, pick 71, and he's only turning 22 this year in June. I mean, you look at some of the rookie running backs coming out this year, they're like 24 going on 30, it seems like, with some of the ages, but he's still a young guy. Didn't have a lot of run last year. He only played in 8 games. He was injured, obviously coming out of college. He was kind of injured going into the season, got hurt in week 9 and didn't play again until week 18, where he had a pretty good day. 5.62 yards a carry, 13 for 73 and a touchdown. And I believe he was RB 13 that week. The Saints didn't do absolutely anything in free agency. They didn't have any backs. They didn't draft a back. And Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams are only two backs in his way. I still think Kamara's going to do his thing, but he's definitely not the same player that he once was. Both Kamara and Williams are going to be 29 this season. We're starting to see Kamara's efficiency slip a little bit. He had his second lowest yards per carry at 3.86 this year, and he had career lows in rushing yards, yards per reception, and yards per target. He played in 13 games, two of the last 3 years, and Jamal Williams is coming off his worst season of his career, averaging under 3 yards a carry. So there's no reason why Kendre Miller can't supplant Jamal Williams rather easily. And I know there is a new offensive scheme coming to town with Clint Kubiak, and historically Kamara works very well in tandem with another back. I still think that should happen with the Saints, and Kendre Miller should be that guy getting a ton of first and second down usage, and get some third down usage as well, considering he is a all-purpose back. But there's no reason why Kendre Miller can't be the leading rusher for the Saints this year. So I'm willing to take that risk at his price, and I'm kind of all in on Kendre Miller for 2024.
Deeper, are you taking deep flyers on Kendre as well?
Yeah, I like Kendre. I think I'm willing to get Kendre as like a toss in for a trade. I like him, and I like everything that Ethan laid out. The especially adding on top, like last year in the small sample, we did see he did force missed tackles on 24% of his plays. He had 3.07 yards after contact per attempt, both pretty strong numbers. And again, we're dealing with small sample sizes, but that per touch efficiency that you want, he showed it in small sample. The only thing that I'll say as far as the pushback on Kendre is if he doesn't hit this year, I do worry that there is another element of risk with him, because I look at Dennis Allen as a lame duck coach. Like, I think he's gone this year after this year. And when you get the turnover of head coaching stuff, unless the guy is like cemented and kind of insulated with one of two things, usually it's either draft capital or a contract or both, however that kind of works out. You see, like, if say if the Saints change over head coaches after this year, like if Dennis Allen, like the Saints win 7 games, whatever, they bomb out, they win, hell, maybe even if they win 8 or 9 games, maybe if they make the playoffs and they get a first round exit, Dennis Allen gets his ass canned after this year, then you're looking at a situation where it's like, did Kendre show enough to where a new coaching staff will ride him coming in, or do they draft a guy? What does that look like? Because the third round capital is good. It's not as insulating as like even second round capital. So especially with the injuries that he had in his rookie season. So he's not going to have like 2 years of runway to show like anybody like, look, I've done it. I've done it for 2 years. You can lean on me. So there is some risk there. But I mean, to be honest, that's already priced in his like with his
Exactly.
price right now,
Exactly.
So it's like you could get him tossed into a trade. So like you're incurring the risk in the price that most people are having to pay for him. So no, I think it's a fine call, because I think the risk is justified in his price right now, but there is certain risk underneath the surface too.
100%. I mean, at this point in Dynasty, any investment in a running back is risky. The way the
Oh, yeah.
league the way the league's going. But yeah, he's definitely a player that you probably don't want to seek out individually. You want to get him tossed into another bigger deal. And it's much easier to scoop up cheaper shares of Kendre Miller. But no, I mean, I think he's going to have some opportunity this year.
Mhm.
I think with the third round capital, I think the third round's almost a new second round. And
I
almost
agree with that. I do
it
agree with that too.
so I do think that is legitimate capital into a running back, and the team didn't do anything at the position. So I do think he's going to get a shot. But like I said, if it doesn't happen this year, he's probably a dead asset, which is the risk.
Yeah.
But hey, if you can get him cheap, I'm willing to take the risk.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I think there's some good points on all sides of that for sure. Definitely a situation to monitor. And hey, it only takes one injury in front of you at running back to get your shot. So maybe that injury bug knocks for an older Kamara this season. We'll see. But we've kind of touched on a lot of younger guys, rookies, second year players, things like that. Let's pivot over to a more established wide receiver that fantasy managers definitely know of. We're gonna talk Christian Kirk, Debro. He was one you wanted to mention. He's 92nd overall in the rankings and comes into WR 38. Why do you have him on your list as an undervalued asset?
Just because I think that he is set for a career season. I think that where you can get him in drafts and startup drafts is not going to. I think that we've gotten to the point with Christian Kirk in his career where the price that it takes to acquire him in both startups and trades versus the production you can get out of him, that diagram is flipped. He's in now the veteran bucket of you're going to get more bang for your buck than you're going to have to spend in a trade or that you're going to have to spend in a startup. And I think he's going to be Jacksonville's wide receiver one by a clear margin this year. And this is not me tossing shade so much at Brian Thomas Jr., but like we do need to mention him. But like we know who Gabe Davis is at this point in his career. He's going to stretch the field. He's going to have some weeks, but most weeks he's probably going to suck. Like the other part
Yes.
about, and I know people are going to push back with Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram did not break out, and I will be very clear about stating this. Evan Ingram did not go on that monstrous run until Christian Kirk was out with injury. You can look at it. I've tweeted about it. Go look it up. You can look at the box scores if people want to. It did not happen. Evan Ingram did not go into a moon landing until Kirk was out. And if you look at what Kirk did in the games where he was a full-time player, because Dougie P did some goofy shit in week 1, he did not play a full complement of snaps. But if you look at weeks 2 through 12 last season, Christian Kirk was the wide receiver 19 in fantasy points per game. He was earning a 22.6% target share. He produced 2.31 yards per route run, and he was on a full season freaking pace of 138 targets, 94 receptions, and almost 1,300 freaking receiving yards. So, as a player who in all formats, redraft, dynasty, everywhere, is priced as a wide receiver 3, you could get wide receiver 2 production out of him this year. Yeah, huge buy. Huge buy. And I'll also cover it this way. He's a huge buy, and I don't care if you're competing. I don't care if you're rebuilding, because here's the thing. You can go trade for Christian Kirk right now for a 25-second, and if he hits in the way that I think he's going to in the regular season, you could sell him for a first, maybe a first with a little bit of plus on top of it. And that's what we talk about, like these small little equity gains in Dynasty. This is another one.
Ethan, do you think you could sell Christian Kirk for a first if he has a WR back end mid range to back end WR2 season?
It depends on the manager, but I think
In season.
yeah,
In season.
I was just gonna say in season, I think you can potentially get that because I am high on Christian Kirk, and I'm in lockstep with Debro. He was wide receiver 11 the year before last, and then obviously last year injuries played into it. But Debro mentioned vacated targets and how it's an over basically used statistic for receivers that need to earn opportunity. The thing with Christian Kirk is we know he can earn those targets because he's a good receiver. So with Zay Jones and Ridley gone, that's 200 vacated targets that Christian Kirk, I think, is going to earn a ton of those. I mean, Ingram had already 136 targets last year. I mean, I don't see that number going up. If like you said,
down.
Exactly. It's probably going to go down with a healthy Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas on the outside. I mean, Gabe Davis will earn a target every other week or so, but this offense also has so much room to grow. I mean, you look at Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he was number 8 in pass attempts, deep ball attempts, number 5, air yards, number 5, passing yards, number 10. He was. I mean, this offense is set up to take off. And I think Christian Kirk is going to be a massive benefactor of that. And I think he can get back to the that wide receiver 11 season that he had not too long ago.
Can we also have a small conversation? Because I don't know which else guys' thoughts on Brian Thomas Jr. too. Because I know when people hear this, they're going to say, "Oh hell no, man! BTJ is going to be the wide receiver 1. He's a freaking stud. Like, didn't you see his athletic testing? Like, he's so awesome."
Oh my
Like,
God! Did you hear Ethan's rant on Brian Thomas Jr.? Is that where you got that
no,
from?
no. That's the other part of this. I want to have a conversation right now about Brian Thomas Jr. Ethan, I need to know your thoughts because I kind of get the feeling we're probably hand-holding on this, but I need to hear your thoughts because I am much lower on Brian Thomas Jr. than I think the majority of consensus is.
I'm pretty high on Brian Thomas Jr. I've definitely learned.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've definitely learned. Like I said, I like Christian Kirk too, but I don't. I'm
Mhm.
not expecting Brian Thomas Jr. just to roll in and be the wide receiver 1. Christian Kirk's too good of a receiver and too good of a target earner, I think, for that to happen. But it, I used to fall in this trap all the time. You used to look at the metrics like, oh wow, look, this guy is an athletic specimen.
Yeah.
I know Pack can attest to drafting Denzel Mims over T. Higgins and Michael Pittman because of those testing numbers in rookie drafts.
That was the one time I went down your rabbit hole there. I never did it again.
So yeah, I've learned. So I've learned from my mistakes. But in terms of Brian Thomas, he's an athletic freak, but I also think he is very fluid as a route runner. Obviously, he has insane deep play potential. He had led the nation with 17 touchdowns last year. I just think there's obviously he's set up. I just went over their passing numbers with Trevor Lawrence. There's so much opportunity there. And I do think Brian Thomas Jr. can develop and become a more nuanced route runner, even though I do think he is very fluid for his size. And then just obviously his upside, in my opinion, is just through the roof if he can put it together. A lot of upside. Obviously, we've seen these players flame out many a times, but I'm still in on BTJ.
I'm lower on him because can he grow and be maybe more, or if they use him in a certain role, can he have a really good rookie season? I think it's possible, but I think there's multiple things with Brian Thomas Jr. One, like you said about the testing, dude, the NFL is littered with guys with stupid good testing. I mean, John Ross will say hi. Marquez Valdez-Scantling says hi. There's numerous guys out there that can look amazing in the gym and they suck on the NFL field because wide receiver is so much more than the athletic
100%.
testing.
Yep.
It's like, and I'm not saying like, oh, hey, the guy runs a freaking 4.8. Like that's not a problem. It's like, no. I mean, if you can hit the benchmarks on athletic testing, that's all I really care about for wide receivers. It's like, okay, well, if you're also an athletic freak, maybe that adds to your ceiling and stuff. But there's so much more to playing wide receiver than saying, hey, I run fast in a straight line. I'm really good. It's like, okay, but Brian Thomas Jr., I look at him as more of a limited player. Like, could he be more? But right now in his current iteration, all LSU tasked him to do was run to space versus zone, run go routes, run fades, and a few stop routes. Like, did not hardly ever run any in-breaking routes. And if you look at just his analytical profile, if I were to tell you there was a wide receiver that was drafted in the first round in the NFL draft this year, tested like a freak, but this is what his final season at in college was. Out of every FBS wide receiver with at least 50 targets, this is where he ranked last year. 32nd in yards per route run. Okay, that's not too bad. 92nd in PFF receiving grade, 102nd in yak per reception, as well as in his collegiate career, he only produced 5.3 yards after catch per reception. Some of the shimmer and shine kind of wears off of BTJ's analytical profile pretty damn fast whenever we look at some of the other deeper stats outside of just kind of like at LSU, put up a lot of touchdowns and had some big plays.
You're preaching the choir on that one for me quickly on Thomas. I mean, I wouldn't, maybe this is spicy, maybe it's not. I wouldn't draft him in the first round of a 12-team Superflex league in the first round.
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't. I wouldn't either. I mean, I just look at it like there's so much duplicity to his game. I just feel like he's like the sexier version of Gabe Davis. It's like I think he's going to stretch the field. I think both of those guys are going to open up everything underneath for Kirk and Ingram this year. Like, I think that the definitive two leaders of that target, as far as who's going to lead that team in targets, it's either going to be Christian Kirk or it's going to be Evan Ingram. I don't see Gabe or BTJ as having a shot at that.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like obviously you're acknowledging Davis and Thomas are going to have their weeks. You're really high on Christian Kirk. Sounds like you're not that low on Evan Ingram either. If you think he has a shot to maybe be at least second on the team in targets, I guess, where does that leave Trevor Lawrence for you? If you think these other guys are going to have at least good years, and where do you think he's prime for a bounce back?
I think he is one of the quarterbacks that the farther that I've kind of gotten into diving into what does the team look like? What could this team be for this season? He's one of the guys that, like, if you want to talk about offenses and just quarterbacks or players in general, like, who could really surprise this year? I think Trevor Lawrence is a big one. Like, I sold him. I traded him away in multiple spots this offseason or like last year and stuff. And now I'm honestly regretting that in some things, because the more that I've kind of looked into what this offense could be, and also the big thing that I also kind of look at is how did teams finish out last year, and could any of those trends continue into the following season? Because sometimes teams tell you at the end of the season when things are kind of running hot, or they've kind of like understood some things or whatever. Sometimes teams tell you who they're going to be or who they could become at the tail end of the previous season. So I have to bring this up, but weeks 11 through 18 last year for Jacksonville, they were 5th in neutral pace, and they were, let me see where they at, 8th in neutral passing rate. And so it's like, dude, and this offseason, they didn't go out and say, oh, we want a bunch of hog mollies up front, and we're going to run the freaking ball, and we're going to draft another running back. Shit, no. They were like, we're signing another receiver. We're drafting another receiver. We're going to put weapons around Trevor Lawrence. Dude, we might see Jacksonville come out and be like top 5 to 7 in both pace and passing rate this year, and Trevor Lawrence throw for a shit ton of yards and have a really damn good season. So I am much higher on Trevor Lawrence now than when we started the offseason.
Yeah, it almost gives me shades. You see Lawrence catching a lot of strays out there on X or wherever. And
a lot of it's deserved, though.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like, for the hype and
right,
kind of how he's played throughout his career up to this point. So
yeah, if you wanted a piece of him last year, it was expensive and it burned people. So I totally get it. But it almost gives me shades of Jameis Winston from about 5 years ago, when coming into the season, you could ask someone like, how do you feel about Mike Evans? Oh, I love Mike Evans. He's great. How do you feel about Chris Godwin? Godwin, oh, he's the shiny new toy. He's amazing. He's awesome. What about OJ Howard? And at that time, people were into OJ Howard. He was a top 7 tight end or so. Like, oh, I love him. He's going to be great. And then you get to Jameis Winston and you say, well, what do you think about Winston? You say, oh, he sucks. When it's like, you can't have all these.
You can't like this,
yes.
and this, and then tell me the quarterback's going to be dog shit. Like that.
Right.
That math doesn't work out. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I'm sitting there like, is Mike Glennon going to come in here and all of a sudden make these guys elite? Like
Mike Glennon. Oh,
name drop.
That's a neck shot from a previous year.
Yeah. But so let me stick with the AFC South and a quarterback, I guess, while we're on this theme of QB, and it's going to be Will Levis. I mean, this is a guy that I'm kind of interested in kicking the tires on. And it's not really so much of what he did or didn't show me in his half a season or so of starting last year. It's more so what the team has done around him to improve that roster. I mean, they drafted offensive lineman J.C. Latham at number 7 overall. They go ahead and sign Tony Pollard. They bring in Calvin Ridley to join a wide receiver room that already features DeAndre Hopkins. They sign a couple of high profile guards in free agency too to fix that line. Brian Callahan comes in, who was an offensive coordinator in Cincinnati too. So I don't know if Levis is going to succeed or not, but are you in on the pieces, the moves that the team has made to at least get the answer to whether he can play or not?
I'm in on the moves. Yes, I'm in on the moves. I'm not in on Will Levis. I am in on the moves, because the reality of it is what Tennessee has done is they have put enough parts or pieces around Will Levis to say, okay, you're either going to be our guy or you're going to be 2023 Sam Howell. You're going to prove that you suck, and we're going to be moving on after this. And that's the other part. Like, I think that people are missing a little bit of the part or piece of the puzzle with Tennessee. It's like this team is not only setting up Will Levis to prove or disprove whether he can be the guy. I don't think he's going to be the guy, but they're putting him in the situation to prove, can he be the guy? And if he can't, they literally could take advantage of a rookie quarterback contract next year. They could go out and draft a guy, trade up, draft a guy, and all this money that they're spending in free agency to surround Will Levis on his rookie deal, they could just draft a guy and find the answer next year. So I'm in on all the moves that Tennessee has made and trying to put the parts and pieces to find out, can he be the guy? My biggest thing about Will Levis is I was not high on him as a prospect, and he did nothing last year to show me that I should feel any different. Like outside of amongst 45 qualifying quarterbacks, this is Will Levis. 41st in adjusted completion rate. As far as CPOE, he was 23rd. That's kind of propped up a little bit too much by his one big game. If you look at just catchable target rate, 41st out of 45 guys.
That's good.
It's not. It's just not good. It's not good.
It's not. But Ethan, I guess you liked Levis some as a prospect last offseason. Do you think any of those metrics could be maybe skewed a little bit by the fact that the team around him was not as good as it will be in 2024?
I mean, obviously, us being Patriot fans, we've seen teams' lack of willingness to put pieces around their young rookie quarterback, obviously, and a guy like Mac Jones.
Oh, you got Mac Jones scars. That's all I heard.
Yeah, exactly. I was never a Mac Jones fan at all, but at least the Patriots could have surrounded him with better talent to see, hey,
Yeah, agreed.
prove that you can't play, right?
You mean with talent at all to begin with, right?
Yes,
Not
exactly.
better
Yeah,
talent,
that's
just
fair.
anything.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a rough couple of years. But with Will Levis, at least Tennessee is giving him the keys to a nice car and being like, hey, can you drive this thing?
Just don't wreck it. Just don't wreck it.
Just don't wreck it. Just keep it on the road and see what you can do. But obviously, Will Levis has all the physical tools, but can those physical tools actually equate to a competent NFL quarterback? We'll find out soon enough. Yeah, who knows?
My only, on top of everything, worry about Will Levis is one, and I'm going to steal this stat, which also carries a lot of water from my dude Brett Whitefield over at Fantasy Points. Even when you put him in clean pockets, Will Levis, out of, let me see here, 46 quarterbacks, 20th in clean pocket passer rating, 23rd in passing grade. And it's like, that's kind of like that. It's not good, but it's like you could shade that like, well, he was over the 50th percentile. I guess there's some hope. But it's also, to me, I look at that as another bullet point of like, because people always say with Levis, they're like, the offensive line was bad last year. Okay, that's fine. He was under pressure a lot last year. Okay, that's fine. I agree with all of that. Okay, what did he do when he actually got clean pockets? And then I'm like, it still wasn't great. Could he be a little bit better? Maybe. I think that's the rosiest like outlook I could possibly have on Levis. Like maybe there's something there with those metrics, but it's still, it doesn't paint you a picture of like, well, when he was clean pockets, he was top 10 and everything, you know, where it's like clear and definitive, like, okay, those other arguments hold a little bit more water. Like, yes, it was crazy. Yes, he was under pressure. When he wasn't under pressure, he was good. It still kind of paints the picture of he was okay. He definitively was not like amazing.
Yeah, one more thing I just say about Will Levis, kind of somewhat in his defense. It's like, okay, he was a player that wasn't obviously a top 10 NFL draft pick. He's a player that should have sat the entire season and just learned, right? So he's forced into a situation where he's put into a spot where he's probably not ready. So can he use last season and develop? I think he can. And when it comes to playing the quarterback position, when you're getting hit, when you start doubting your offensive line, when you do get that clean pocket, you're not just still feeling the warm and fuzzies. You're still like, hey,
seeing ghosts.
Yeah,
you
you're
got
seeing
the Sammy
ghosts.
Darnolds.
Exactly. So it's not, even though obviously there's some opportunity with clean pockets, that doesn't necessarily mean he's still comfortable in that pocket. And for a quarterback, that's a massive hurdle to get over. And hopefully, obviously, he'll get over that and he can actually take advantage of these clean pockets and develop. But just a little 2 cents for maybe some to defend Will Levis a little bit.
Yeah, it's already a make or break season for Will
Oh,
Levis
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But
Oh, absolutely.
the
Because he
team
doesn't
did
have
their
the
part.
first round draft capital to cover his back either to get other opportunities. Like
Right.
that's the other thing that
new
Ethan brought
regime
up.
too.
Like, yeah, he won't make it through if he doesn't hit this year. A second opportunity is probably not coming. So.
Agree.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely kind of an all-in move. But if you're a gambler and in Superflex, you're desperate at quarterback, and you can get him cheap enough, he might be worthy of a flyer for you, depending on your specific situation. But let's go to a guy who's in kind of he's in a crowded situation to start his career, Debro. This is one of the guys you wanted to go over. Another rookie. This is Ricky Pearsall. He's 122nd overall in Fantasy Pros Dynasty ECR. Good for WR45. So just talk us through what you see in Pearsall and why he's a good value where he's going.
Because the only reason he's being drafted at that freaking spot is because people pretend like Deebo Samuel is definitively on this roster, even week 1 or even
100%.
after this year. If Deebo was already moved, if he was traded in the NFL draft, Ricky Pearsall would not be ranked that damn low. Just straight up, he wouldn't be. So it's like, we're playing this damn game in a 2 to 3 year window, and you're talking about a first-round wide receiver that just got drafted by the damn 49ers in a good offense. They have a stable quarterback room, and everybody says, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, why? Like, why? I really don't understand it. Like, right now, I've got Ricky Pearsall. Where are you at, Ricky? Where he's my wide receiver 25 in Dynasty. Like, I've got him right next to Xavier Worthy, where he should be, because I don't give a shit that Deebo Samuel's still there. Deebo Samuel, even if he's there for this season, he will not be there after this season. So I don't care. Like, I'm not going to fade a first-round wide receiver and a talented guy that crushed every part of the process. He went to Mobile, he showed out. He tested like a freak. And I didn't think he was even going to test that well, and he did. And if you look at all of his, not box score counting stats, but if you look at his deeper efficiency metrics, he pops in those as well. He was 88th percentile in receiving grade, 91st percentile in receiving grade against single coverage. Last year at Florida, not even talking about his film, dude has unreal hands. He's awesome at the catch point. He is a dog in route running. Like, the guy is a really, really damn good route runner. He can play inside, outside, and he can offer you something as far as after the catch, and he's got a good enough speed to stretch the field. Again, this is another like situation where it's like the same dumb shit people are doing with Jermaine Burton is the same dumb shit they're doing with Ricky Pearsall. I don't get it.
Well, I guess well, talking about his college career for a second. I mean, I know the box score stats definitely aren't everything, but this isn't a 2 or 3 year college player we're talking about. This guy was in college for 5 seasons, and 4 of those years he played 12 or more games. Is there a reason that those metrics didn't transfer over at some point in a long college career to counting stats?
What was the last Florida quarterback that you can go through that was actually really good at throwing the damn football in college?
Well, he was
even if we want to talk about Anthony Richardson.
Well, he was at Arizona State as well, correct?
Okay, was Jaden Daniels good at Arizona State?
I wouldn't say he was elite by any means.
Not so great. No, not so much. No,
but you made the point earlier that eventually talent rises to the top, right? I mean, isn't that
and
you would think for a
year.
guy he's a little bit on the older edge too. I mean, like when he suits up for week 1, it's actually his birthday on week 1. He'll turn 24 years old, so he's hitting the NFL at an older mark. So he didn't have that really good season until he was 23 years old playing against 19, 20, 21-year-old college defensive backs. Do you think that holds any weight in this evaluation?
I think so. If we were to have this conversation about 3 or 4 years ago, and you would tell me that a guy was a late declare and a little bit older of a prospect, would I have cared more? Yes. Now with transfers and NIL money and things like that, do I care as much? Not as much. I'm more willing to look at the film. I'm more willing to look at efficiency metrics when they come out and try to give context, because the other part about this is and let's just take this from a top-down approach with a kid. if you heard from said speculative agent or whatever agency, and they said, okay, if you come out in this year's class, and this is something I fought back against with Christian Watson when he came out from FCS. If somebody told you, if you come out in this year's class, you're going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick, maybe would you be that inclined if you're playing at a major SEC school? Would you be that inclined to come out? No. Why would you do that? Versus if you go back to school and you stay, and now you're a senior, now you have the opportunity to go to the Senior Bowl, get in front of coaches, show them what you can do. You have a good season, you can improve your draft stock. Also, NIL money. Would you come out and say, okay, I'd rather be a day 3 pick in the NFL draft? Or would you say, oh, I'm going to go back and I'm going to earn some more money, maybe improve my draft stock. And if I come out as a senior, now I can go to the Senior Bowl in Mobile and get in front of all these other coaches in this all-star setting and help myself that way as well. I think the answer is pretty easy. Like, I'd have stayed my ass in school too.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and it's definitely a different environment for college athletes to succeed financially, whereas before they were just getting the shaft left and right. So I do understand it from that lens why he would go back.
Some of these kids are making more in college than they're going to make on their NFL rookie deals.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Shit, I'd stay in college too. I'd stay in college as long as I can. If you're paying me, I mean, seriously though, like if you're paying a kid $500,000 a year to, like in NIL money, and he's making more than he's making on his rookie deal for the first 4 years, he can make what, half of his rookie deal, maybe 3/4 of his rookie deal in 2 more years of college. Shit, I'd stay in college too. Forget the NFL. I'll get to the NFL when I get to the NFL.
Yeah, and I hear where you're coming from that for sure. Obviously, it would have been nicer if he had produced a little more in his 5 years in college, but obviously there's some reasons for that. I guess the second piece of this to me is age now more than ever in Dynasty is a bigger factor. Ethan, you know this from a lot of leagues we play in. Like, guys don't want to touch players that are even getting into their late 20s, which you could argue is a buying opportunity in itself. But with him being at an advanced age, and I know you, Debro, you're confident that Debro's not going to be there beyond 2024. I could see that. I think he's definitely going to be on this roster this year because they're a win now team. They have Super Bowl aspirations. Like Debo's a dog. Right? I mean, do you disagree that they have Super Bowl aspirations right now?
Oh no, they absolutely have Super Bowl aspirations. But here's the thing: can you pay Brandon Ayuk the contract that he wants if Debo is still on that freaking team this year?
I think you can. There's a million ways you can spread out cap space in this league, right?
Theoretically, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen.
It may or may not happen, but I think if there was ever a time for a team to push for a Super Bowl, it's right now, and they could spread that hit out for a year on Ayuk, especially if they're going to move on from Debo after the season. But even if Debo is gone, I mean, Kittle's going to be there. CMC just re-upped. In this scenario, Ayuk's re-signed. So, yes, I know it's easy to kind of just plug him right into that Debo role. But if he doesn't take off like that into that Debo role right away, now you got a guy who's already 25, and if it doesn't hit right away, now he's 26 and he hasn't panned out yet.
25? You're talking about him like he's damn 30. Like,
yeah,
what?
Well, I'm saying he's in this scenario, if he doesn't pan out right away in his first year as a full-time player in 2025, he's 25 years old, and that doesn't work out. Now he's 26, and then he's 20. Like,
and he's still super young. Like, that's still 26.
Yeah, that's if
he's not 28. He's not 30. Like, still, it's not old.
It's not old from the grand scheme of things as an athlete for sure. But like Ethan, you know this too. Like, is age not a big factor in Dynasty that it should at least be considered for a guy who has a bunch of bodies in front of him right now?
I think age, especially when we first started playing Dynasty, and
some of the old bodies in front of him.
So some of the leagues that we play in, they're definitely ageist. Like, you get to that 28, 29, they just want nothing to do with you. But I do think as we get the years go by in Dynasty, right, I think people are less concerned with age because I think people are looking at it at such shorter windows. I mean, when you first started Dynasty, I'm going to have this guy for 10 years. It's like your window is like 2 to 3 years. Like,
yes,
like it's like,
say that too.
Yeah, but back in the day, it's like when you first started Dynasty, I have this team forever. That's not the case. So when you're looking at a 2 to 3 year window, Ricky Pearsall is still going to be on his rookie deal. Debo's definitely going to be gone, and he is going to be able to ascend as the clear-cut wide receiver 2 on that team, and he's going to be able to eat in a Shanahan-led offense, and I want all that. I was doing everything I could to move up in all my rookie drafts in the second round to get Pearsall when he was falling to the mid-second.
Oh, dude, he was falling like what 206, 207. Like I got him at the 208 in one of my drafts, and I'm like,
yeah,
what are we doing here, man?
I was moving up everywhere I could to get him because he is a 4-year deal with a 5th-year option. I mean, you're telling me in 5 years he's not going to. I think he's too talented. That offense and that offensive scheme, that coaching staff is too smart. The 49ers are too good of an organization, I feel like, to let him fail. I'm in on Pearsall.
The other thing I'll bring up here too, and I get I'm giving you shit, Pat, but like the reason I'm also bringing this up too is that I think we need to get out of the mindset of looking at any player as they're going to be on my roster for the next 6 or 7 years. The reality of that happening in any actual league that's active is very, very rare. Like
100%.
most players that on your roster, if you do a startup today, I can promise you will not be on your roster in 3 years from now. Like it is very damn rare. Like unless it's like a wide receiver one continuously, like a Justin Jefferson, the elite of elites. Like outside of that, most players you draft right now might not even be on your damn roster by the time they even get to a second contract in the NFL. So it's kind of like, for me, I'm like, I don't give a shit if he's going to be 29 in 5 years. What I care about is he's young now, and if he's producing and he's that guy in the next 2 to 3 years, shit, in 3 years he's still going to be 27. That's perfectly fine. He's not 30 or 32, so it's fine by me.
Yeah, that's a fair way of looking at it. And it's actually funny that you bring that up because yesterday I just traded the last piece of my startup draft from our first Dynasty League back in 2017. He was the last guy I still had on my roster, and it was a guy who fits the mold exactly what you were talking about. That was Travis Kelce.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously you kept him for as long because he was the number one at the damn position for so long. So
yeah,
yeah, those kind of players, yes, you can absolutely make the conversation of maybe those guys are going to be on your team for 6 or 7 years, but like, do we ever draft those guys in a startup or like on rookie deals or in a rookie draft and know that at that time? No, we don't know that about any of these guys until after they've declared that after 2 or 3 years of mega production.
For sure. And we got a couple more guys to touch on here. We'll get through these last few here. Let's go back to tight end for a second here. Speaking of Travis Kelce, let's go with a much younger guy. Debro, this is another one of yours you wanted to talk about, and you've talked him up all off season too as one of your guys. And Eric All, he's 266th overall,
baby.
Tight end 41. That just feels like criminal, man. You need to get your colleagues together at Fantasy Pros and have a come to Jesus moment on this guy's ranking him 40 plus in the tight end ranks, man. Talk me into him.
Dude, I've been drafting Eric All, and I've been out here telling everybody. And if people think that I move mountains with ADP, shit, yeah, I can show you my Eric All exposure and tell you that is definitively not the damn case. So like, I just keep drafting him, and I don't look. The risk of drafting Eric All and the risk of the downside of Eric All is all baked into where he goes in drafts in spades, dude. But none of his upside is captured in that at all. It literally is not. If I were to tell you there was a tight end that came out in this class, he lands in a plum spot in Cincinnati tied to one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, said tight end over the last 2 seasons where he could garner at least 20 targets. He ranked 3rd and 10th in yards per route run. He ranked 16 and 30th in PFF receiving grade. This same damn tight end, before he got hurt last year, tearing his ACL, when he got sidelined amongst all FBS tight ends, he was 7th in receiving yards and 11th in missed tackles forced. And over the entire year of collegiate football, he still ranked 1st and 8th in yards per route run and receiving grade against man coverage. And that's one of the things I always bring up with all these guys in saying, can you capture elite upside at the position? That's all Eric All. Like all of those metrics are Eric All. And yet everybody's like, I don't know, man. The ACL and the injuries. And the other thing about the injuries, people talk about the back injury that he sustained and the ACL in the same breath. And that is another thing that I don't really understand. You talk about, not you specifically, but people out there will talk about Eric All and they mention both of these things in the same breath. Like he he sustained both of them on the same damn hit. Holy shit, he tore his ACL and he broke his back or whatever happened to him on the same damn thing, and both of these things are still a concern. They're not. Can we break that down real fast? The back injury that everybody is so damn worried about, he already came back and played football in 2023 and showed you that the back injury is no longer a problem. It's in the rear view. The only reason he got taken out last year was the damn ACL tear. So let's take the back injury out of the freaking equation, okay? He already came back and proved that he was healthy off of that injury. So done. That's gone. So now you're telling me we're so worried about an ACL tear? I'm sorry. I believe in modern medicine. I'm not that worried about the ACL tear. And then they want to say, oh, well, we didn't see him test. It's out there on X. I tweeted this out. If you go watch his film, he proves he is nothing but athletic, and it's littered. And I will point to people to this specific clip of that proves his testing on certain levels. Okay?
I know where you're going. I know where you're going. Let the people hear.
Yes. If you go and you pull this receipt out there on X, and I tweeted it out, there is a crosser that he takes to the house, and he outruns a specific cornerback for Penn State named Kalen King. Kalen King was able to test. We know how fast Caleb King is in his 40. He ran a 4.6 at his at I think it was the combine. He also ran a 4.5 at his pro day. So either way, you want to say at his basement, we know Kalen King runs a 4.6 40. Eric All took the crosser and busted it down the sideline, pulling away from Kalen King on the field, running away from that guy, a guy that has 4.6 speed. So you're telling me, okay, well, maybe at his baseline, he's got 4.6 speed, but he was running away from the guy. So maybe it's 4.5 speed. Holy shit. Well, didn't Kalen King also run a 4.5 in certain spots? Dear God, maybe Eric All has 4.4 speed. Maybe. We don't know. It's not confirmed by testing because the guy tore his ACL, so he can't. But if you go back to his film, his athleticism is confirmed on his film. If you look for context, it is. So what box do we not want checked by Eric All? He got decent draft capital for a freaking tight end. He covers all the boxes and checks them emphatically for efficiency. And if you go to his film, he proves that he is not a schmo in the gym and he can run. Why in the hell is Eric All ranked where he's ranked? Why is he falling into the middle or the back end of the third round in rookie drafts? I don't get it, guys.
Yeah, it's a great question. He's essentially free at the end of every rookie draft. And Ethan, you and I talk on the show when we talk tight ends, especially guys where you could get them on your roster for nothing. What are the two most important things that we like to highlight when you can get a guy for nothing at that position?
When you get a guy for nothing, I mean, I always looked. I mean, is there opportunity? But the biggest thing, hey, are they usually are they athletic and do they have opportunity? That's kind of what I look for.
Yep.
Athleticism and opportunity.
At tight end, you have to be a high-end athlete. If you're not a high-end athlete, put it this way. If you run a 4.8 or slower at tight end, you're dead to me. I don't care. I will not draft you. I don't give a shit. Yeah. You can name on one hand how many fantasy relevant tight ends in the last 10 to 15 years have run a 4.8 or slower. It's two guys. It's Kyle Rudolph and it's Isaiah Likely. And that is it. End of freaking list. Yep. If you're not a high-end athlete at tight end, you will not ever be an elite producer at tight end. You won't. You have no shot in hell at it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. If you're slower than that, your ass is blocking at the next level. If you're at the next level, for sure. And there's opportunity
you're Jake Ferguson, and you just hope that you fall into a shit ton of volume. Good luck.
Yep.
Good luck to you. Yeah, and look, this tight end. The last point on Hollier is this tight end room has been searching for a guy that could put down some roots with Joe Burrow and grow. They've kind of had the revolving door of Hayden Hurst and Herb Smith. This year, it's Mike Gesicki, who Ethan and I just saw as Patriots fans. And this guy sucks, man. Like, this guy is not good, man.
He's
a one-trick pony, and that one trick ain't that great right now.
Nope. No, sir. Mike McDaniel couldn't even make the most of this guy in Miami. So that's how bad he is. But yeah, there's nothing but opportunity here for Eric All. So I like him a lot going into this season and hopefully beyond. I got one more guy I'm going to talk about here. It's Jalen Wright. Back to the running back position, 134 overall, RB 37. And where the first guy I brought up was Zamir White, was kind of a day one producer. Wright's going to take some patience. Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane are probably going to get the first cracks in this backfield. Although Mike McDaniel did have a good clip come out here saying what a competitive room that it's been, and maybe a young and hungry guy like Wright could come in here and get more targets out of the gate. We'll see about that, but we know this is going to be a two-back system. Achane's not going to be a guy who carries the mail based on his size. Mostert looked good last year, broke down a little bit at the end, and he turns 32 this year. What's to say this isn't the year he breaks down, coming off a career high in workload in 2023? So beyond 24, they can get out of his contract very easily. So, I think even if this is worst case, a de facto redshirt year for Wright, I think he's set up for a bigger role in 2025, and I'm confident that for a couple of reasons. One, they invested a third round pick in Jalen Wright, and Ethan just said it earlier. Like, that's the new second round for running backs, and so even though he was a fourth round pick this year, they used the third to get him, which is not insignificant. And their team is about to get very, very expensive, particularly on offense. Tua's looking for the bag. Waddle just got the bag. Tyreek Hill's talking about how he wants some more money if he's going to keep playing. So they need to cheap out somewhere, and running back's going to be the place to do it, with Achane and Wright on cheap rookie contracts to help offset some of that cost in their offense. So Ethan, I'll go to you first here. I know you've kind of been a Wright guy. So are you still feeling the good vibes on him at this stage in the process?
I am. Jalen Wright, I mean, he's exactly what Miami is looking for: explosive, fast running back, and he has some size to him. I think Mostert is gone after this year, and I think Jalen Wright and Achane can be that tandem. And in that offense, I mean, all you need is a little bit of opportunity. You can score a ton of fantasy points. And like you said, I love that they used the 25 third round pick to move up into the fourth round to get Jalen Wright, and that kind of set off just a waterfall of running back picks in that back end of the fourth round.
Well, half of those were the Jets picking every running back they could. So
yeah, pretty much. Hey, Braylon Allen's looking pretty good in OTAs and minicamp.
Yeah, first back at the Breeze Hall, baby. He gets to watch him first on the bench.
Talk about another guy who, if you have your rookie draft before the NFL draft, my God.
Oh God. Well, if you were following my ranks, you were never in on Braylon Allen to begin with, so you were okay.
Yeah, this is why Devy managers pull their hair out. They wait 3 years to get the news that Braylon Allen isn't as good as behind Breece Hall.
That he's not athletic at all. That's why he skirted every bit of testing. Yeah. But anyway, side note, Jalen Wright. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, Jalen Wright, he's definitely a much better athlete than Braylon Allen. But no, Jalen Wright, I liked him coming out of Tennessee. Just an explosive back. You can see it on film, contact balance. And like I said, I like the team investment and like the opportunity going forward. So definitely a guy I was trying to get in a lot of my rookie drafts.
Yeah, I love this call. I mean, I think when I first saw that he went to Miami, I looked at it as total nightmare fuel. I was like, oh, shit. And then the more that I've simmered on Jalen Wright's landing spot, I think he's a slam dunk, stupid good value, because he's one injury away. Injury away from being the RB2, hell, maybe the RB1. It's like, he's the biggest running back on that damn roster. Like, he has the highest BMI. He has the biggest size. Like, if I were to tell anybody, like, okay, Raheem Mostert goes down, Jalen Wright is the goal line running back, and it's not Devon Achane, like, would anybody be that damn surprised by it? Like, they shouldn't be.
Now, especially with Tua's health injury, he's not going to be a guy you run into the goal line for those cheap 1 yard touchdowns either. So, yeah, good. I liked him. I like him a lot this year. Hopefully this year, and if not in the long run. Last guy we're going to mention is a high profile running back. D-Row, it's your guy, Jonathan Brooks. Talk to me about him and why he's going to be good at some point in 2024 and hopefully beyond.
He's going to get all the freaking work, man. Like, as soon as he's healthy, he's getting all of the work. Like, that's what's going to happen. Like, we saw this all with Dave Canellis and Rashad White, and the way that I have framed Jonathan Brooks, and I want to give, and I know I'm probably ahead of consensus. I have Jonathan Brooks already ranked as my RB9 in Dynasty right now. And he is a locked in RB1 in Dynasty. It's just, I don't think people realize it yet. And if I were to tell you, you can draft at a discount, because I was in rookie drafts at the very beginning of rookie draft season, Jonathan Brooks is falling to the top end of the second round, and I'm laughing my ass off as I'm drafting him just religiously, continuously, because I'm like, dude, he's legitimately Rashad White, except he's actually good and he got draft capital. Like, why do we not want any of that? It's like, oh, but Carolina might suck. I don't give a crap. Tampa Bay's offensive line was terrible last year. It didn't stop Rashad White. If you're getting all the damn work, it's not going to stop. He's going to get a lot of volume, man. And maybe that doesn't happen out the gate in year one. Maybe that doesn't happen in the entirety of 2024. But as soon as he is up to like full health, he's getting all of it. Whether that happens to the back half of 2024 or all of 2025, it's going to happen. He's a damn good football player. You want to talk about efficiency metrics? He checks all the boxes there. He got the draft capital. The easiest way to frame it is he's Rashad White, but he's actually good at football and he actually got draft capital. And I don't understand why people have a problem with him and they don't see him in the same way.
Ethan, you're the Rashad White guy here. Did that hurt you at all, or where are you at on Brooks?
I mean, it didn't really hurt me because I understand he wasn't the most efficient back. He was propped up with immense opportunity. But hey, what do we say? Opportunity is king in fantasy football. So hey, if you're getting the opportunity and you're scoring me fantasy points, that's all I care about. So yeah, Jonathan Brooks, once he is fully back, he is going to be clearly the RB1 in Carolina. You don't invest a top end second round pick not to use him. So I think I know, Pat, you're very high on Jonathan Brooks, and you think he may be a league winner down the stretch. So I'll kick it over to you and give you some final thoughts.
Yeah, sure. This is kind of akin to me, sort of like Kenneth Walker 2 years ago, if you're looking at it from a redraft standpoint, or maybe even like Rashad Penny in 2021, I believe that year was, where he kind of comes in middle of the season towards the end and goes on a run and wins people leagues in redraft. And obviously, he's not cheap in Dynasty, but he's still going at the end of round one in Superflex leagues. Like, if you can get a guy that Debro said is a top 10 running back, like, you'll pay that all day, a late first round pick for that, especially for a young player like him. But yeah, you're going to have to be a little bit patient. Like, I don't think much of Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders at this stage. Yeah, maybe they'll be in his way in the early going. I'm not going to put Jonathan Brooks in a daily lineup in week one or anything crazy, but like this guy, I think down the stretch, once he gets a full year removed from that ACL injury, once we get around Thanksgiving or so, that tail end of the year, Carolina's going to be better this year, I think, but they're not going to be in the playoff hunt. Like, that's the time where they might just say, "Screw it, these guys aren't the future for us. Let's see what we have, and then we can get something akin to that workload that he gave Rashad White, which amounted to 76% of the Buccaneers' total running back touches in 2023. Hopefully, that we can get Jonathan Brooks getting that type of volume. He's winning people leagues down the stretch in 2024.
I'll also say this, boys, and I want to conduct this thought experiment right now. If Jonathan, tell me where you think his value is comparatively. Jonathan Brooks gets drafted by Carolina. Do you think people would love Jonathan Brooks even more if he did go to the Cowboys, like everybody was hoping? Do you think, like, I honestly believe, like, if he was drafted by Dallas, everybody would have drafted him higher in rookie drafts. He'd be getting more buzz and people be talking about him in a very, very different way than what they're doing because he landed in Carolina. I think that's part of it too. The Carolina stink.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. There was a bunch of we did an episode where we talked about premier landing spots prior to the draft. Cincinnati was on the list. Houston was on the list before they got Mixon. Like,
I
Dallas
said
was
Carolina
number one on the
for
list.
weeks ahead of time. I said Carolina is a fantastic running back spot. Miles Sanders can get his ass cut for minimal dead cap. Chuba's gone. Whoever lands there is going to be awesome. And then Jonathan Brooks lands there, and everybody's like, it's okay, but it's not great. I don't know.
That's actually what those people sound like on the internet. You're right.
They do. They do. You can hear it as you read the tweets. You're like, oh God.
Fair enough. And he will take an ounce of patience, but this is Dynasty, folks. Like, he doesn't have to be in your starting lineup right away for you to reap the rewards in this guy for what we hope is, a 5-6 year stretch at the running back position. So that was a really fun exercise of buzzing through a Q&A and all these really good, dynasty values out there. D-Bro, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on, brother.
Oh, guys, thanks for having me. Anytime y'all want me to come sit here and run my damn mouth, I'm more than happy to, man. So, I really appreciate y'all reaching out. Really appreciate you taking the time to sit here and talk ball with me tonight, man.
Appreciate you, my man. We'll wrap this up the same way that we always do, host, with a nice loud peace.